The story began with a guy with long hair sitting next to a grave and thinking about the meaning of life, about how empty and incomprehensible it seemed. He looked at the grave and thought that all the tears and sighs belonged to those who live. And then someone standing behind asked the guy whose grave it was. The guy with long hair replied that this was the grave of their family. An older man standing behind him with a stick told him that he understood how he felt and that it must be very sad. The man began to talk about how when the whole world seems to be destroyed, your heart is probably filled with sadness. The old man started to cry, but then he smiled and told the guy with long hair that he shouldn't worry so much. The guy with long hair felt that something was wrong and realized that the old man was hiding something. Suddenly, the old man turned into a huge monster and started screaming at the guy with long hair, warning him that he would soon join his family and die. The guy was terrified because he did not expect at all that the old man would turn into a monster. But the guy was determined. He suddenly turned and struck hard with his katana, wounding the monster. The monster screamed in anger and pain as the guy's blow seriously damaged his body. The guy with extraordinary speed dealt several more blows and cut the monster into pieces, but the monster no longer moved. He was dead. The guy with long hair and red eyes was brave and was not afraid to fight the monsters on his way. Suddenly, the old man appeared from behind again and asked the guy if he had fought with the demon, and the old man added that every time it was the same, and the guy was not fighting with the old man himself, but with the demon that was chasing him. The guy looked at the reflection of his blade and saw an old man. He realized that the old man was himself. The old man touched the body of the demon, who was pretending to be an old man. He touched the demon with his finger and said that it was wrong to deceive others by pretending to be an old man, and that the demon was just a big headache. The old man asked the guy with long hair if he was going to leave now that his family was gone. The guy looked at his hands and decisively declared that he was going to leave. The old man told him that money and demons were running out and started laughing, and he said that now the guy would fight demons on his way, but the guy argued that he wouldn't. Then the guy shouted and said that there was one more wish, after which he looked at the grave. Suddenly the guy realized that he had a new desire. The elderly man was surprised and asked what we were talking about. The guy said that he wants to become a real person. The story moves to a vibrant metropolis. Near a huge city, people lived, ensconced in tents in the middle of the forest. Suddenly, one man began running from tent to tent at incredible speed. He watched the tents as if he was afraid that someone would catch him or something would happen. Suddenly, he saw something that scared him greatly. He continued running as if someone was chasing him. The guy approached the tent and began to lift it to hide inside from the one who was pursuing him. Suddenly, a voice came from behind and ordered him to stop doing this. A man stood behind him, leaning against a tree and carefully watching his every movement. The casually dressed man told the guy that this was not the place for him and asked him to go home. He also added that at this late time, good boys should already be asleep and have sweet dreams. The guy smiled and asked the man who called him a good boy and then began to take out his knife. The guy threatened with a knife and insisted that the man answer him, claiming that among the locals they say that their boss is called Hayaki, since the guy wanted to make sure that it was true. The man remained calm and repeated that he did not know about Hayaki, but the guy continued to put pressure on him, claiming that if the man was homeless, then he must know about it. All the homeless people woke up and started asking what was going on and why there was so much noise, and they were confused by this sudden scandal. One of the homeless people saw a guy with a knife and called him a puppy, and then he was asked how good he was with a knife and why he threatened the man. A lot of homeless people gathered to punish a guy who began to threaten one of them, and the guy clearly did not expect such a development of events and began to feel afraid. The guy was visibly excited. Beads of sweat appeared on his face, but he decided that perhaps this was how it should be. He waved his small knife and shouted for Hayakimaru to come out and show himself. However, he was suddenly shocked by one of the homeless people, and it was a huge-sized man with a rolled-up face and a glowing red eye. The guy and the homeless people were amazed because it turned out that it was Hayaki, whom the guy had been looking for so long. The guy did not expect to see such a huge and scary homeless man and asked a question about his true identity. Hayaki smiled in response to the boy's question, and his eye sparkled brighter. He began to speak, and his saliva began to flow, and his eye glowed brighter than ever. The guy was brave and claimed that this homeless man was out of his mind, and he suggested that these might not be Hayaki, but just similar names. One of the homeless people admitted to the guy that he didn't know why, but he had a feeling that this was not the person the guy was looking for. The homeless man then suggested that after what he had seen, it was time for him to leave, and it was time for the wandering brothers to go to bed too. The boy was deeply disappointed, lowered his head, and thought about the meaninglessness of this day. Suddenly, someone started shouting to the guy and pointed in his direction, and the guy turned his attention to the man. The man the guy was looking for was surrounded by 2 strong guards, after which he said that he had finally found him, and this game of hide-and-seek was over. The man who came to the homeless camp was called Young Master. One of the homeless people was wary and surprised to see the young gentleman in their camp. The young master approached the guy and said that at least he found him, and the guy was stunned and did not understand what they wanted from him. Suddenly, one of the homeless people rushed to the guy and extended his hand to him. A homeless man expressed doubts about what was happening and asked what was going on here, suspecting that it was a kidnapping. He added that it looked like a kidnapping, despite the incredible nature of the situation. The young master mockingly replied that even if it was really a kidnapping, what could he do? The homeless man said without remorse that, in this case, it is the adult's responsibility to protect the child. The young master noticed that these homeless people were not as bad as he thought, and he was surprised that they were protecting the unknown boy. He began to approach the homeless and said that the reward would not be great, since his goal was to return the boy to the warmth and safety of home. The young master took out money and invited the homeless to disperse peacefully, promising to reward the one who brought the boy. The homeless people were amazed at the amount he held in his hands and began to discuss what plans they could carry out with this amount. But they were not sure that the money would be enough for a full meal. The homeless people realized that they were dealing with rich people, and although they might think that the young gentleman was associated with the Yakuza or similar groups, money was the most important thing to them. All the homeless people looked at the boy and tried to grab him in order to get the money that the young master was holding in his hands. Homeless people surrounded the guy, demanding money and wondering how much food and drink they could buy. The guy was in great pain, as many people leaned on him and he screamed in pain, unable to resist, his face pressed to the ground. The young master and his guards were surprised at how quickly the homeless people obeyed his commands. He threw money into the air and thanked the homeless for their service. All the homeless people rushed for the money, shouting and competing to see who could pick it up first, and the password was simple: whoever had time took it. The young master held the girl by the neck and began to choke her, and the girl screamed in pain, suddenly finding herself in a dangerous situation. The young master said that the girl resisted for a long time, and it was just a game to be caught. He started laughing loudly and took off the girl's cap. Under the cap was not a guy, but a girl with long hair that she hid. The homeless man who tried to protect the girl was shocked, not expecting that his brothers would betray their principles and not protect the child. The girl appeared in front of everyone, and the homeless could not believe that they were mistaken in thinking that it was a guy. The young master began to behave aggressively, mocking the girl, and this greatly offended her. The girl cried and begged for help. She felt fear and despair. Someone interrupted the young master and said that he had more questions for the girl. The homeless man came closer and expressed his dissatisfaction with the young gentleman's offensive behavior. The homeless man tried to hit the young gentleman, but he deftly dodged the blow. The man took the girl in his arms, holding a knife, and prepared to protect her as the young gentleman approached. In response to the attack, the homeless man stabbed the young gentleman on the cheek with a knife, and he began to bleed. The homeless man began to free the girl by cutting the ropes with which she was chained. The homeless man then asked the young gentleman what he wanted from the girl. Raising the knife, he reminded the young master and his guards that they were acting like bastards, not like people. The homeless man's words angered the young master, and his appearance began to change, and his skin became scaly, and his tongue became longer as he asked the homeless man how dare he scratch his skin. The young master transformed into a giant lizard, and the guards next to him followed suit. The guards turned into spirits, and the young master, now a lizard, began to attack the homeless man with them. The homeless man remained calm, assessing the situation and thinking about how best to protect the girl. The transformation of the guards made the lizard much more powerful, and he became an entity with a long body, reminiscent of a snake and a lizard. The homeless people were amazed to see the young master turning into a monster, and they were scared and began to get nervous as they discussed what was happening. The young master, now a monster, asked the homeless man how he dared to force him to show his true nature in front of this poor rabble. With these words, he attacked the homeless man, threatening to tear him into pieces. But the homeless man remained calm and ready to protect the girl, while he pointed the knife at the monster and took the girl, trying to avoid the attack. With impeccable courage, he flew several meters into the air, dodging the monster. After landing, he remained on his feet, wondering how to cope with such a giant monster. Suddenly, the homeless man transformed, turning into a long-haired fighter capable of destroying monsters like the young master. He raised his small knife to attack, but he knew that an ordinary knife would not cope with such a formidable monster. The monster's incredibly strong scales protected it, and the knife broke instantly without causing harm. The monster rose into the air again, preparing for a new attack, and it was clear to him that he was much more powerful. With a grin, the monster noticed that the guy was darting in front of him like a rat and ordered him to stand still. Then the monster attacked again, opening its huge mouth in order to destroy the guy. Suddenly, one of the homeless people stood in the way of the monster, ready to protect the guy and the girl, and this homeless man was completely wrapped in bandages, and his bright red eye was glowing. However, his attempt to protect them failed, and the monster chewed off half of his body in one bite, causing fatal damage. The monster retreated some distance, preparing for the next attack. Suddenly, the long-haired guy began to prepare for an attack and rushed at the monster. The girl tried to stop the guy, shouting for him to stop because it is difficult for a person to resist a demon. The long-haired boy confirmed this as he began to summon his weapon. It was a katana, a powerful weapon capable of dealing with demons like their opponent. The long-haired guy was ready to continue the fight and protect the girl from an incredibly powerful demon. At the end of the katana was an unknown sign that promised more than it seemed. The demon saw this blade and began to get nervous, realizing that this was not such a simple opponent. The long-haired guy was already preparing to attack, deciding to destroy the demon with the help of his powerful weapon. He bit his hand and pulled out another blade instead of bones, preparing to fight. In his left hand he held a blade, and in his right he held a katana, ready to fight the incredibly powerful demon that stood in his way. With incredible courage, he rushed into the attack to destroy the demon who was threatening the girl. Suddenly, the demon realized who was in front of him, and the guy dealt 2 deadly blows with his blades. The demon found out that it was Hayaki. The demon's body was torn into large pieces, and with just a few blows, Hyakimaru defeated the huge and strong demon. The girl realized that he was the guy she was looking for, Hyakimaru. Hyakimaru pierced the demon's head with his blade, delivering the final blow, and the demon was defeated and crashed to the ground as it weighed several tons. He coped superbly with the demon, who was much stronger and larger, and saved the girl. Turning to the girl, he said that his name was really Hayaki. The girl was shocked, not expecting that an ordinary guy could be Hyakimaru. The girl still stood rooted to the spot, shocked by what was happening. She couldn't figure out what to answer him, and even forgot why she needed him. Suddenly, something began to rise out of the mud caused by magic. Little by little, a cute little dog was formed from the mud. Hyakimaru announced that this little friend's name was Maru, and began to hide his blade that was sticking out of his hand. Hayaki suggested continuing the conversation in a more appropriate place, and the girl seemed to want to ask him a lot of questions. She still didn't look up at him and announced that she had finally found him. Suddenly, the girl screamed his name and said that he was her parents' sworn enemy. These words shocked Hyakimaru because he did not know that he could be the enemy of some parents. The girl rushed at him, threatening to kill him. In the past, these events developed and the girl went somewhere with her parents. The girl's father insisted that they hurry up and move faster because it was pouring heavily outside. The father began to shout loudly at his daughter. Her name was Roro, but the girl was confused and could not understand why they were in such a hurry. She started asking her parents where they were going in the middle of the night and suddenly dropped her phone. Roro started to get nervous and worried about dropping her phone and also about making sure it didn't break. Suddenly, the girl saw something that she did not expect at all. Her parents were loading things into the car as if they were going to leave, but they were not paying attention to her. The father asked the mother if all the things were packed, and then told everyone to hurry up and get into the car, and Roro had to get into the car first. The parents started calling for Roro, but she did not respond and was not in sight. The mother continued to call her daughter, but suddenly the father stopped her. An unknown man appeared on their way and walked towards them. The man was familiar to them, and he was walking towards them. The parents realized in horror that it was Hyakimaru. Suddenly, people in military uniforms with gas masks on their heads appeared. They surrounded Roro's parents, and they were in a panic, worried about their daughter and their lives. Masked soldiers grabbed Roro's parents and they screamed, begging to be released. Hyakimaru then ordered the soldiers to release them. He watched as they knelt down and looked at him and began to ask where Roro was. The parents were silent, fearing that something would happen to their daughter. Hyakimaru realized that the parents probably wouldn't tell where their daughter was and began to take something out of his pocket. He announced that dealing with old people is always troublesome, and without thinking, he put the gun to his mother's head. As soon as he pointed the gun, he immediately pulled the trigger and fired, after which the mother began to fall to the ground, dead. Hyakimaru smiled, after which he said that, to be honest, he didn't care about them at all. The father was shocked by what was happening. His wife's blood was smeared on his face. He did not know what to do, and wanted to finish off Hyakimaru with his own hands. He started screaming at him. He was incredibly angry that he had killed his wife and called him a bastard. As soon as the father wanted to say something else, the military man immediately hit him in the face with the butt of a machine gun. The father fell unconscious from the incredible force of the blow with the butt, because the blow was carried out directly on the head. After the father woke up, Hyakimaru asked him for the last time where his daughter was. And again, he put the gun to his father's head and began to threaten him, and that he would kill him if he did not tell. He had a huge hematoma on his face, and one eye could no longer see anything, but he still kept his mouth shut and did not want to tell him anything. But suddenly, he heard a noise not far from him and began to turn around to see what was there. Roro hides in the bushes, witnessing his mother's death and attempts to catch his father. She experiences great horror, holds the phone in her hands and cries, not knowing how to help her parents. Her father smiles at her, but realizes that he cannot help her. Closing his eyes, he understands his inevitable fate. The gun is getting closer to his head, and he looks into Hyakimaru's eyes, preparing to shoot. Hyakimaru is indifferent to the man's feelings and is ready to pull the trigger. Roro's father fails to avoid the gunshot, and an explosion is heard in the downpour, causing the girl to cover her ears with her hands and break her phone. She begins to cry even louder, completely despairing, and she feels sorry for her parents. Meanwhile, Hyakimaru orders everything around her to be burned, including the bodies of her parents. He orders the soldiers to destroy all evidence of the crime and set fire to everything in their path. Roro family's house burned down along with the bodies of her parents, destroying the girl's entire life, and her family died and her home disappeared. Hyakimaru is devoid of emotions and watches what is happening indifferently, since the fate of the girl is not important to him. Roro watches her house burn and collapse, and horror and despair take over her. This is why Roro wants to take revenge on Hyakimaru for the death of his family and the destruction of his home. Further, events unfold in the present, when Roro and Hyakimaru spend the night in the forest. Suddenly, the dog comes up to Roro and licks her cheek, waking her up. The girl is surprised and does not understand why the dog woke her up in the middle of the night. When she gets up, she notices that Hyakimaru is awake and she becomes annoyed, not understanding why he is there. Hyakimaru turns around when he sees that the girl is woken up. The girl points to Hyakimaru and says his full name. She does not understand what happened to Roro. They are both dumbfounded by the situation in the tent. The girl tries to draw moisture from the ground, but Hyakimaru tells her that she should not waste her strength in vain. The dog continues to lick her, and Roro feels furious and angry, convinced that Hyakimaru killed her parents. Suddenly, the girl begins to remember how she ended up in the tent. Memories start come back. She remembers how she ran to Hyakimaru and threatened to kill him. Hyakimaru dodged her first strike and asked her to wait. Roro was full of rage and continued to attack him, calling him crap. Hyakimaru deftly dodges each of her attacks, shocking her with his agility. The guy decides that this can't go on any longer and decides to stop it using his power. He lightly hit the girl on the back of the head, causing her to lose consciousness, and then he calmed her down. After the blow, he told her she needed to cool down, and she began to lose consciousness. Roro finally realized how she ended up in the tent with Hyakimaru. Roro began to cry because she realized that she could not land a single blow, and it destroyed her. Hyakimaru tried to console her and handed her a can of hot preserves that he had just heated on the fire. The girl was amazed by such kindness from Hyakimaru because she thought that he was cruel and a murderer. Hyakimaru offered her something to eat and said that if she still wanted revenge, she shouldn't die of hunger ahead of time, and the girl was shocked by this answer and got angry. Angrily, she took the canned food from him and began to eat straight from the can. Hyakimaru wanted to offer her chopsticks, but saw that she needed to eat quickly. After eating, Hyakimaru asked if she called him her sworn enemy, would he threaten the people close to her? The girl did not understand the answer and said that people usually deny in such cases, but Hyakimaru explained that when you live for a very long time, it is difficult to remember every victim. The girl again did not understand him and asked if he had hit himself in the head. She then said that he couldn't be that old, but Hyakimaru interrupted her and asked about Roro. Hyakimaru was frank and said that Roro was also not ordinary, and this shocked the girl. Roro began to get nervous because she didn't understand how he knew about her. He took out his katana and asked if she realized that her position was now vulnerable. Raising his katana, he threatens her. He then presented a katana right in front of her head and began to threaten her. Hyakimaru asked what she would do if he actually killed her. And suddenly he smiled and asked, what if he was her sworn enemy? The girl was shocked and didn't know what to do next because she thought she wanted to avenge her parents, and now she suspected that it was him. Roro realized that this was the same Hyakimaru who killed her parents, and he began to wave his katana, preparing to hit her. The katana hit him right in the head, and blood began to spray. Despite the wound, the girl continued to look at Hyakimaru. It turned out that he struck with his sword not at Roro, but at a strange entity that was next to her. After being hit by Hyakimaru, the unknown man fell near Roro. The girl started screaming and asking if this was an ordinary person. Roro screamed at Hyakimaru, accusing him of murder, but Hyaki said that it couldn't be called murder, because the entity he killed was not human. The girl was shocked by his answer and turned to look at the corpse of the man who lay behind her. But then something terrible happened. As she came closer to the body, she saw that it was a terrible monster, and even the dog began to bark at it, and its face was crippled with a terrible smile and huge bulging eyes, and it had inhuman horns. Roro asked if it was a demon, and Hyakimaru replied that some of the homeless people here might seem like one. He then added that they are usually calm, but at the moment something has affected them. When they left the tent, they saw that several more homeless people were surrounding them and were about to attack. All these homeless people were ready to kill them and eat their bodies. Their mouths were open and their sharp teeth were shining, and there was only emptiness in their eyes. Roro was shocked by what was happening and asked why Hyakimaru said that they were calm because they were aggressive, and Hyaki explained that they are usually calm, but today something was wrong and they decided to attack. He realized that the strong energy in Roro had caused the monsters to forget the rule that they could not harm him. This energy was hidden inside Roro, in her heart. Hyakimaru decided that he would need to deal with this energy later, but for now, he had to deal with the monsters that surrounded them. Suddenly, all the monsters attacked them at the same time. Hyaki told Roro that he would be a little busy. Meanwhile, events continued to unfold in the city in the pouring rain. In one of the houses, and the man told the woman that she was telling absurd things. The man angrily asked the woman if she was really offering him to work for herself. The girl confirmed that this was indeed the case, and she knew that it might seem stupid. She started laughing and remarked that only real fools would agree to such a thing in such a situation. She then asked the man what he was going to do if he didn't agree to her proposal. After that, she called all the men around her idiots, and the men began to wonder what to do next. The main man furiously punched the girl in the face. He looked at her with anger and asked where she got the right to order them. All the men around her began to threaten her, and the main one declared war on them. The man grabbed the girl again and said that he wanted to do something else before that. He lifted the girl from the floor and as if he wanted to start beating her again. The man took out a cigarette and said, "Let's fix her smug face." All the men were happy with the decision of the main man because he told them to do whatever they wanted with her, just not kill her. And when they finished, let them throw the body into the street. All the men agreed with him. They grabbed her, after which he began to talk about how they had not had a girl for a long time. And if you compare her with the one who was last time, then she was still very beautiful, and each of them was anticipating fun. After which, the men began to argue about who would be first, and the girl, meanwhile, laughed and said that she thought so. Suddenly, the whole room was covered with a bright, shining light from the place where the girl was. She shouted that she would never get tired of this, and the main man was shocked by what was happening because he did not expect anything like this. He turned around because he didn't understand what was happening behind him. As soon as the main man turned around, they immediately fired a bullet right into his shoulder, and the other man aimed his pistol at him again to shoot. The boss began to scream in pain. He did not understand how this happened and why the girl turned into a man with a gun. The boss looked at the man and said that he was a bastard, after which he asked him what came over him. The man found himself in cahoots with the girl, and she approached him, declaring that he was actually unkind. Then she began to take off her dress. On her body one could notice many purple eyes, each of them directed in a different direction. She then smiled and asked why he did what he did. The boss realized that he was dealing with something supernatural, and at this time the girl reported that her phone remained intact, which she attributed to happiness. The boss began to make excuses, claiming that if the girl had warned from the very beginning and said that she was a demon, they would have acted differently, and the girl replied that it no longer mattered. It was obvious to the girl that this was no longer important because she wanted to mock them all. She began filming her boss while blood was pouring from his shoulder and continued to abuse him. She then said that she had now sent the proof and smiled, pleased with herself. The boss began to get nervous because he did not know what to do next and how to act in this situation, because he was much weaker than the demon since he was just an ordinary person. But suddenly the girl began to leave as if nothing had happened. The boss began to threaten that if she just left, he would take action, but the girl, not paying attention, closed the door behind her and said goodbye. Then his former friends came onto the stage, armed with katanas and pistols, ready to finish him off, and the boss was in shock and realized that death awaited him. At this time, the girl was watching the video on her phone and was pleased with herself, as she had achieved her goal. Unexpectedly for the girl, she received a call, and she was happy about it. She picked up the phone and said that this was unusual, since her interlocutor rarely calls. The interlocutor told the girl that the boss was dead, and she began to laugh loudly, expressing joy, since she believed that he deserved his fate due to his arrogance. After this, the interlocutor offered her a new job, which previously belonged to the boss. She was assigned the task of kidnapping Roro, and the interlocutor sent her a photo, and the girl noticed that the target looked cute. In response, she opened her mouth and stuck out her long tongue, saying that the target looked very tempting. While Roro was worried about something, she did not feel calm. She found herself in an unfamiliar room, sitting on the bed, and had a hard time understanding how she ended up here. There was a dog sleeping on her lap, and she wondered why this dog was sitting on her lap. Roro pondered what to do next, petting the dog with one hand. Hyakimaru suddenly emerged from the bathroom, announcing that he felt much fresher after his shower. Hyakimaru asked Roro if she would also go to the shower, but the girl was embarrassed because Hyaki was almost naked and said that she would not go to the shower now, so he needed to hurry up and put something on himself. After which she opened her eyes and continued to look at Hyakimaru. Roro watched as he began to dress. Suddenly, Hyakimaru noticed how Roro was looking at him and told her to stop staring at him because he has no problems with movement. Hyakimaru also added that what was important now was that he managed to find a safe place to stay, and Roro asked him if it was truly a safe place and why it was safe. This place seemed unlikely to be safe, considering they had accepted a man who was covered in blood from head to toe and hadn't blinked an eye, and Roro was still underage. After this, the girl pointed her finger at Hyakimaru and said that, in her opinion, he was the main danger, and in response, Hyakimaru told her that she was being too cruel to the one who saved her. Hyakimaru also noted that Roro may have gone with him to escape those who attacked her, and because of this, his house and tent were destroyed. He also said that they should reconsider what happened again, and at this point he was getting closer to understanding what was happening, and Roro's parents were killed by someone who had the same name and face as Hyakimaru. The girl asked him if he was claiming that it was not he who killed her parents. Hyaki answered her, said that he did not remember ever committing such a crime. The girl began to scream loudly and asked him who he thought it was then. He told Roro to calm down, and in any case, apparently it had something to do with him. After which he began to think about what he should do in the future. Hyakimaru said that he would help the girl. The girl was extremely surprised and asked if he would really help her, but Hyaki said that he would help for a reason. He said that he would take the thing that was inside her. The girl was shocked by his request, because she didn't even understand what was inside her. The girl took her heart and said that before she makes up her mind, she wants to know more about what this thing is inside of her. She asked how it could be so important that several people would be killed for it, and why her parents had to suffer so much because of what was inside her. Hyakimaru wondered how best to explain to her what he meant. He then started talking about how it might have no value to some, but to others it might mean everything. The girl started getting angry at him and asked why he couldn't just tell her what it was. Suddenly the dog started barking at the door as if he had heard something and suspected that someone was behind the door. They both noticed the dog's reaction, and then Hyakimaru told the girl to pack her things. After all, people with weapons began to pursue them, who were already very close to their shelter, and the girl looked out the window and realized that they had been discovered. While they were being followed by a demon girl who was tasked with kidnapping Roro. The girl burst into loud laughter, realizing that she had already been discovered despite her caution. Her laughter became even stronger and boisterous as she was preparing a surprise for them. At that time, her people were approaching the house of Roro and Hyakimaru. They, like zombies, were under her control, and she could completely control them. The people who served the demon girl approached the door and were thinking of ways to get inside to eliminate Hyakimaru and Roro. However, people suddenly encountered something they did not expect at all. The door was shattered by a strong blow, striking one of the men. Hyakimaru got out of his room and was ready to fight anyone who stood in his way, as he promised the girl to protect her. He noticed that they were humans, which made him sad, since they were much weaker than demons, and Hyakimaru felt bored while fighting them. Hyakimaru destroyed every person who stood in his way without the slightest remorse, because these people sought to kill the girl and himself. He then ordered the girl to follow the dog and run to the roof, but she could not contain her curiosity and asked what he was going to do. Hyaki replied that he would join her soon, but first he decided to destroy all the people who stood in his way. The girl was amazed by his incredible strength and courage that he demonstrated. The guy showed amazing strength, fighting with 2 blades against many people, and meanwhile Roro lay on the roof with her dog. People did not even think about retreating. They were somehow fascinated and did not understand what fear was and how to retreat from the enemy in general, and they continued to attack tirelessly. Hyakimaru was resolutely opposed to these people because he was ready to defend his and Roro's lives to the end. With powerful blows, he broke through the crowd of people, trying to get to the girl on the roof. As the remnants of the crowd lay dead on the floor, Hyaki continued moving forward along the roof. Looking back, he was surprised at how quickly he had dealt with them, and the thought occurred to him that this might be too easy. Suddenly, he noticed that someone else was approaching him. In front of him were girls with weapons, ready to attack him. Their eyes were fascinated, and they seemed like demons. Seeing them, Hyakimaru smiled and asked if it was time for them to go to bed. Meanwhile, Roro was approaching the back exit, which led to the roof. She ran as fast as she could, knowing that her safety was at stake. And finally, they and the dog reached the roof, very tired from running at full speed. Roro began to worry about Hyakimaru and how he was doing in battle, wondering why he hadn't appeared on the rooftop with her yet. Suddenly, the dog growled, having detected someone in the vicinity. Behind Roro, someone asked if she was worried about Hyakimaru, and the girl was shocked, expecting that there was no one else on the roof except them, and she did not expect to hear anyone else's voice here. Suddenly, a demon girl appeared in front of her, sitting right on the roof. The demon girl greeted Roro and smiled at her, calling her cat. And then she said that she was cuter in real life than in the photo, and Roro asked her who she was. Suddenly, the dog rushed towards the demon girl with the intention of attacking her, sensing the demon's evil mood towards Roro. The demon girl noticed the approaching dog and asked Roro what kind of dirty and ugly creature it was. She ordered the dog to disappear and kicked it hard, after which the dog disappeared. Roro felt very sorry for the dog. She had already become attached to her and wanted to keep her close. Suddenly, a demon girl crept up behind Roro and said that now they were alone and hugged her tightly. Roro began to wonder how the demon girl ended up behind her so quickly, and Roro didn't even suspect that she was dealing with a demon, while the demon girl, meanwhile, was still smelling Roro and noticed that she smelled nice. The demon girl extended her giant tongue and began to lick it towards Roro. Roro was scared of this girl. She didn't know what to expect, and her approach with her tongue was repulsive, and she started screaming, asking someone to save her. Suddenly, someone ran up to the roof very quickly. It was Hyakimaru. He instantly prepared to attack the demon girl with his katana to save Roro. He continued to prepare to strike with his katana to deal a devastating blow to the demon. But suddenly, the demon girl quickly jumped back with incredible speed, avoiding the blow of the katana, showing her extreme dexterity. Roro was shocked, but at the same time happy to see Hyakimaru, and she felt grateful to him for wanting to save her. Hyakimaru bravely prepared to fight the demonic girl who was threatening Roro. He immediately turned to Roro to make sure she was okay and unharmed, and he apologized to her and explained that he was delayed due to the many enemies on his way. Roro could not hold back her tears, since she had been waiting for Hyakimaru for a long time and was worried about him, while she clarified that she was fine. But something terrible happened to the dog, and she was very sorry for her friend. Hyakimaru assured Roro that the dog would soon come to his senses and she need not worry, and then he began to prepare to fight the demon girl. And the demon girl spoke to Hyakimaru and said that they had not seen each other for a long time, and she recognized him. Roro paid attention to this conversation and stopped crying, and she was surprised that the two knew each other. She began to ask them how they could know each other, and how the demon girl knew the name Hyakimaru, while the demon girl said that they were friends. The demon girl smiled and added that they had been friends for a long time and were very close. Roro was shocked by the demon's answer, and began to ask Hyakimaru about their connection with this demon girl. They all stood there in disbelief, trying to understand what was happening between them, and at this time the dog began to recover. Roro questioned Hyakimaru and his intentions, but ultimately she decided to trust him, making sure that he had no intention of betraying her. The demon girl said that she had some suspicions after seeing what was happening with her own eyes, and then she asked Hyakimaru if he had been assigned the same mission as her. The demon girl also said that sometimes a customer hires several people to complete one task, and the customer may have had to reconsider their requirements and methods. While at this time, Roro was wondering about the nature of this mission and what all these events meant. The demon girl, meanwhile, was thinking about how she had to put in a lot of effort to find Roro, because Hyakimaru hid her. And suddenly she said that she was ready to give in to Roro Hyakimaru. However, she offered to borrow Roro for one day and promised not to touch anything that was inside her body, since leaving empty-handed would be boring. Roro still did not understand what was happening, and she listened to the demon girl, completely not understanding her situation and not knowing what to do next. The demon girl took out her giant tongue and said that before returning Roro Hyakimaru, she wanted to know what Roro tasted like, and asked Hyakimaru if he would mind. Hyakimaru listened to her carefully but remained silent, not uttering a word. Roro looked at him intently and could not understand how he was going to act in this situation, whether he would agree to the conditions of the demonic girl. The demon girl thought that Hyakimaru agreed to her terms and understood her, and at this time Roro began to be indignant, feeling that he had betrayed her. The demon girl then started laughing and stated that it was time to start. The demon girl touched Roro's head, and she, stunned, did not know what to do, and she understood that fighting this woman without Hyakimaru's help could only lead to her own death. Then she realized that something else needed to be done, and Roro never found out what was hidden inside her and who was behind the death of her parents. But this mystery began to torment her, and she decided that she could not die without knowing answers to your questions. Gathering all her will and determination, Roro categorically answered her doubts no, and she would not die just like that. Roro, full of determination, took a swing at the demon girl, refusing to give up without a fight, and she knew that she couldn't just give in to this mysterious woman. However, the demon girl easily dodged Roro's blow and joked that her kitten Roro was scratching, and she also added that domestic cats have no self-preservation instinct at all. From behind, Hyakimaru approached the demonic woman and extended his hand towards her. The demon girl suddenly turned to see what was happening behind her. With incredible power, Hyakimaru struck the demon girl and she screamed in pain, not expecting him to attack her right now. Hyakimaru rushed at her with undisguised cruelty and malice, trying to finish her off right on that roof. With each blow, he was ready to cut her into small pieces with his blades. Suddenly, Roro, who was standing behind, began to call him, and the dog also barked, and they both turned out to be alive and returned to the battle, while Hyakimaru thanked Roro for her acting and said that thanks to this successful deception, he was able to take the demoness by surprise. Roro suddenly realized that he was pretending like he didn't care. Hyakimaru turned around and looked into Roro's eyes and smiled, and his smile showed his true feelings, and he really wanted to save Roro. And that was the most important thing to him. The demon girl started screaming, saying that she was in great pain and asked Hyakimaru to let her go. Suddenly, she brought her hand closer to his face, preparing for some action. The demoness used her magical abilities and a bright light flashed in front of Hyakimaru's face, and she began to scream that such a battle could no longer continue, and this was becoming unacceptable. A bright light flared up around them, representing the demon's magic. But then, suddenly, the light went out. Roro managed to close her eyes, but she still didn't understand what was happening and what was going on. Suddenly, she saw something she couldn't expect. The demon girl smiled as she looked at Roro and said that she had long wondered if her magic would work on Hyakimaru. Hyakimaru's eyes seemed to crack, but then he stabbed his katana into her body, and the demon girl realized that it was not enough. Even after using magic, Hyakimaru continued to fight her and stabbed his katana into her body, and the demon girl warned him and told him that if he was going to do it, it wouldn't be worth it. The demon girl began to smile, but Hyakimaru began to strangle her with his hand, and she told him to look at himself, because his hands were dirty by many women. Meanwhile, Hyakimaru drew his second blade from his hand. With incredible speed, he struck the demon with lightning speed. The demon girl used her magic again, and her eyes lit up all over her body. She used her magical abilities to neutralize Hyakimaru, and he was unable to kill her. But Hyakimaru was much stronger than she thought, and he ignored her attack and remained ready to fight to the death. After the demon girl's attack, Hyaki appeared injured, standing on one leg and seeing out of only one eye, and Roro was worried about him, fearing that he would not be able to continue the fight. The demon girl laughed again and could not understand why he took on the role of a bodyguard, being the last person to be assigned such a task, while she liked the way he played this role. The demon girl was really funny watching him act like a clown. Then she said that she was tired and ran away, promising to meet again. Roro shouted after her because she still had questions. Roro looked on sadly as the demon ran away, and meanwhile Hyakimaru was glad that the dog came to life and was next to him, caressing his hand. Hyakimaru was confused by how quickly the demon girl disappeared, as if in a haze. His eyes showed signs of destruction, and he felt pain throughout his body. Roro hoped that the demon girl would be able to reveal the mystery surrounding the death of her parents, and struggled with difficult thoughts and guesses. She cried, feeling that she could not change anything, and yet Hyakimaru approached her, lifting her spirit, and called her to stand up. He was next to her and ready to help her in her business. He then promised to take her to a man who would answer all her questions. This man was her last hope for uncovering the truth. Many years ago, during a time of devastating and bloody war, human life was extremely cheap. In those days, there lived an overly ambitious lord. He was so greedy that he decided to make a deal with powerful demons. His ambitions led him to desire unlimited power. But of course, everything has a price, and for the sake of strength and power, this lord had to give up his own son. The demons took away his eyes, nose, limbs, and everything they could reach. And thus, the son of the greedy lord was born without these parts of his body, and even more strangely, the lord himself left his child to his fate to die. When he left the child to die, he said that he could always have another son. And so, the baby was released down the river, and everyone assumed that inevitable death awaited him. But miraculously, the baby did not die, and when he returned, he looked more like a strange ceramic doll than a living person. As he grew older, this young man learned that by killing the powerful demons with whom his father made a deal, he could regain the stolen parts of his body. Thus, he was able to get his body back before it was stolen, and this boy became a hunter of the demons who once stole his body parts. From then to this day, he continues his hunt. Let's return to the events taking place at the moment. Hyakkimaru and Roro arrived at the woman to find out all the details. Roro was shocked by everything that was happening, and she could not understand why this girl was acting so strange. The girl was so weird, and she had a guitar, and she played it all the time. Roro decided to ask this girl about Hyakkimaru. The girl began to say that he was so ancient that he personally witnessed the civil war in feudal Japan, and the girl they came to began to laugh and say that he was indeed very old. The girl asked Roro if it was difficult for her to believe this, judging by his appearance. After that, Hyakkimaru went into the room and said that it didn't matter whether she believed it or not, and he decided to share his story because it was important to understand the following information. Roro asked him how he knew what they were talking about if he was in a soundproof room, and Hyakkimaru replied that he had a feeling. Hyakki then asked Roro if she asked him about the thing that was inside her. The girl in front of him had to tell what kind of thing was inside Roro. Young woman introduced herself how apostle. The apostle added that she seemed to know this old man well, but in any case, she was glad to meet you, and shook hands with Roro. Apostle also said that she is engaged in buying and selling various information, after which she smiled and said that it was she who sold the information about Roro to the demons. Roro was shocked, because she did not understand how this could happen. She was incredibly angry with Apostle, condemning her actions and not understanding why she did what she did. Hyakkimaru immediately urged Roro to calm down. After which, Hyakkimaru quickly brought his blade to the apostle's neck and asked calmly if she was calm now. The apostle began to get nervous and begged to listen to her to the end, because she could explain everything. The apostle began to say that Hyakkimaru went on a journey, leaving only Mara with him to find the demon hiding among the homeless, and there was no word or breath from him because this guy doesn't even carry a phone with him and considers it too complicated in use, and so she was just thinking about how she could contact him. Suddenly, a teenager appears, claiming that he is looking for Hyakki. Roro immediately realized that it was her, and the apostle confirmed her guess. The apostle admitted that it was she who informed Hyakki's location, and moreover transmitted information about Roro to the demons. The apostle said that it seemed to her that if she did this, then something interesting would surely happen, and obviously it did. Roro was so shocked by everything that happened in the room that she couldn't even imagine that it could have been a planned plan. Apostle meanwhile argued with Hyakkimaru, claiming that she could not track him and contact him, and Roro began to become jealous and reflect on her relationship with Hyakkimaru. The apostle stated that in any case, everything would be fine if she told Roro what was inside her. Hyakkimaru wondered, not knowing how Roro would react to this, or what would happen if she knew what was inside her. He then said that Roro had a right to know, and Apostle agreed to tell her. The apostle turned to Roro and asked if she remembered what she told Hyakki 5 minutes ago, and Roro replied that she remembered, and it was about the body parts, stolen by demons. The apostle looked at her carefully and told her to remember this. Inside Roro was part of the Hyakki. At this time, fun events were happening in the nightclub, people were dancing to loud music, and bright lights were flickering everywhere. Someone in the crowd decided to open a bottle of champagne, and the sparkles scattered in all directions. The club guests were having fun and raising their glasses. Among them was a demon girl who was enjoying champagne in the company of her girlfriends, and she had just drunk a whole bottle. The other girls around her were impressed by her abilities. The demon girl was called Maki, and other girls asked her if something was bothering her, and she admitted that yes, something was bothering her. Maki told them that she met a cute little cat on the street, and however, when she tried to pet her, the cat bit her hand and ran away, and the girls who listened to Maki were shocked by this unusual case. She later added that the cat was very cute, and this cat had a really wonderful smell. Maki thought about this for a long time and realized that she didn't want to just let the cat go. But she also knew that Hyaki would not allow her to steal the cat. So Maki decided to take out her phone and call someone. Her friends were as if fascinated by her. Everyone around them froze, waiting for Maki to finish talking on the phone. The people around her seemed frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Maki called another demon and offered him cooperation. However, he told her that he was a bit busy at the moment and could not be distracted as a giant spider towered over him, and he stood in front of the spider with a katana and prepared to fight. Maki was sure he was just messing around somewhere, but she didn't know that he was actually fighting a huge spider. The demon stood unwavering, preparing for the spider's attack. After this, he agreed to Maki's proposal, saying that he had no reason to refuse. He then engaged in a battle with a giant spider, the ground cracking with every time he jumped. He attacked the spider with his katana, trying to destroy it. He had the same red eyes as Hyakimaru and wielded a sword. With one powerful blow, he cut the giant spider in two. Maki heard some noise, but the demon told her that it was nothing special, although in fact he had just destroyed a giant spider. At this time, he was still over-interested in who Hyakimaru was. He then asked Meki how powerful he was, wondering if he was capable of handling Hyakimaru. Meanwhile, events unfolded on the road surrounded by dense forest. Roro and Hyakimaru were sitting in the same car driving along the road. Hyakimaru asked how she was feeling, noticing that she looked very restless. Roro began to reflect on the information she had been told, and asked if he really thought she would be able to sleep after everything she had heard. She initially did not believe that there was a part of Hyakimaru inside her. Roro began to question the origin of this thing inside her, doubting that there was a reasonable explanation for it. The apostle replied, claiming that she did not know the reason for this, but Roro thought that it was just mockery. The apostle asked her to speak more quietly and confirmed that she really did not know the reason. Suddenly, Roro noticed something strange on the wall in the room. She was shocked, opening underscore. Portraits of her mother and father hung on the wall of the room. Apostle reported that she had done some research into Roro's biography, and she added that it wasn't that difficult, and Roro's parents were quite famous. After this, the apostle showed a photograph of Mr. and Mrs. Yamada, known as brilliant researchers. And the most surprising thing was the lack of documents confirming the presence of a child. Roro was shocked by this information, as she had not expected that she might not be their child. She didn't know how to react to this news, and the world seemed upside down to her. The apostle began to laugh and suggested that perhaps she had simply been dropped off at her parents' door. She then continued to joke about this topic. Hyakimaru was stopped by the apostle and urged her not to say absurd things. Roro was shocked by what was happening and asked the apostle to be as serious as possible. The apostle replied that no one knows how cruel reality is, and when you know the truth, it is no longer possible to forget it. The apostle asked Roro if she really wanted to know about her origins and whether she would regret it. Roro thought about it and said that she needed time to digest everything that had already happened, and now it seemed like too much of a burden to her. However, she decided that there was no point in regretting what happened. Roro insisted that she was eager to know the truth and had no intention of backing down. Then she asked the apostle to tell her the whole truth that she knew about her. Everything the apostle knew about Roro. They continued to drive in the car, and Roro was at a loss as to how to process this truth that she had just heard. Roro said that the apostle essentially didn't tell her that much about the past. The only thing apostle revealed was that her parents adopted her in secret. Roro mused that if even the apostle couldn't find more information, then perhaps there was nothing left to look for, and she questioned the quality of her services as an information dealer. Roro felt deeply disappointed as she expected to learn more about her past, but in her opinion, the apostle did not provide her with enough information. Out of frustration, Roro expressed her dissatisfaction with the uselessness of the information provided, and felt that she had not learned anything new about herself. Apostle reminded them that she had provided them with a car for ease of travel and the address of the laboratory where her parents worked, and asked Roro how she could be so ungrateful, with Hyakimaru suggesting that they ignore her tricks. The apostle then began to cry and expressed her sadness that Roro did not appreciate the information provided, and she also expressed interest in how they were feeling. After that, she asked them to bring her souvenirs from their trip, and Hyakimaru simply turned off the screen, ending the conversation. Hyakimaru explained that he did this because of her annoying behavior, and Roro agreed with this opinion. Roro expressed surprise that Hyakimaru was so good at using modern technology, including driving a car and using a navigation device despite his age. And Hyakimaru explained that he has been driving a car since its invention. Roro was amazed that he had been driving a car since its invention, considering how long ago it was, and she asked him if he had a driver's license. However, Hyakimaru continued to drive the car without answering her question. Roro began to laugh but still waited for an answer from Hyakimaru. When there was no response, Roro ordered him to stop the car. She began to panic when she learned that he was driving without a driver's license and insisted on stopping, but Hyakimaru told her to calm down. As a result, they arrived in a giant metropolis. They managed to reach the city without incident, despite Hyakimaru's lack of a driver's license. Hyakimaru went to the store to buy water, leaving Roro in the car. Roro continued to think that Hyakimaru was driving without a driver's license, but she was grateful that they got to her hometown. Suddenly, she noticed a photo booth and remembered the moments of happiness when she used to take photos in it. Memories of how much she loved that photo booth started to come back. Suddenly, Roro noticed two girls and her heart pulsed, and they were her friends, Natsumi and Haruka, with whom she had previously been very close. This reunion with her friends brought Roro joy, and she was glad to see them in her hometown. Roro was overjoyed to see her friends, and she couldn't believe that they met here. She ran along the road at high speed, shouting their names and trying to attract their attention. With incredible effort, she finally caught up with her friends and began to address them. Roro screamed their names and tried to greet them, hoping they would recognize her. However, when the friends turned around, they did not immediately recognize Roro and asked who she was. Roro was amazed that they did not remember her and said that only a year had passed, and how could they not recognize her? And she also asked them not to pretend that they did not remember her. After trying to introduce herself, Roro came closer and tried to hold their hands to show that she was indeed their friend. The girls were really shocked and couldn't believe that Roro, whom they didn't recognize, was standing in front of them. Roro asked how they were doing, about their relatives and health, trying to start a conversation. She then invited them to sit in a cafe and talk, but one of the girls pulled her hand away, refusing. Roro was confused, not understanding what was happening, as the girls suddenly became cold and did not want to communicate with her. The girls then asked who she was and why she was pretending to be Roro, leaving her completely bewildered. Roro suddenly realized that the girls were angry at her because she suddenly disappeared and didn't contact them, and one of her friends accused her of lying. Roro was stunned by the words of her friend, who insisted that she was not like Roro, and her voice was different, because Roro, in their opinion, had passed away 3 years ago. This shocked Roro, and she fell into a state of confusion, and her world was falling apart, and she did not understand what was happening, and she began to wonder about the events that had recently happened. Roro realized that she didn't understand anything and decided to ask her friends what they were talking about. Roro told them that they saw a living Roro in front of them, but her friends continued to claim that it was not her, and that she was faking it. Her friends asked Roro questions about why she spoke so strangely, and why she pretended to be someone else. Suddenly, Roro felt a severe pain in her head and began to hallucinate. Her friends were horrified by her condition and began asking her questions, making sure she was okay. Roro claimed that she was fine in front of her friends, but in reality she clearly wasn't fine. Her head began to feel very dizzy, and she felt as if something wrong was entering her mind. And the more she talked to her friend, the more she felt a discrepancy that was entering her mind, as if they had recently been intimate friends. Before her parents died, they were indeed very close to each other. But at this point, her friends were claiming that she was dead, and this confused Roro. Roro was so confused that she really didn't understand what was going on and why her friends thought she was dead. Roro sincerely did not understand what was going on and why her friends believed that she was dead. Everything began to crumble before her eyes, and she had absolutely no idea what was happening. She was not herself and could not understand what reality she was in. Suddenly, Roro woke up. At this time, the demon girl's assistant walked towards her. He was looking for something on his phone while moving through the dense forest. After which, he started calling Suzu and asked him if he got there without any problems. They communicated with each other, and it turned out that the demon was calling Suzu because he was lost. He did not know where to go and asked Suzu about the right path, since he was lost in the forest. Suzu told him to avoid getting lost. He needed to find and remember landmarks, and that she had already explained this to him 200 times. He began to look around and look for the landmarks that were given to him. Meanwhile, Roro was woken up by the dog. She woke up and did not understand what was happening and where she was. And suddenly, it turned out that they, together with Hyakimaru and her friends, were sitting in a cafe and having dinner. The dog of one of the passers-by noticed that the dog Hyakimaru was sitting in the cafe and wanted to get to her. Roro looked at her friends in surprise and asked where they were, but her friends reacted negatively to her words and told her to stop pretending and asking stupid questions after waking up. One of the friends said that they were very scared when Roro lost consciousness. After all, Roro suddenly fainted in the middle of the street, and when she was unconscious, Hyakimaru tried to take her somewhere. But her friends tried to stop him. Roro's friends considered Hyakimaru a very suspicious person because, in their opinion, he wanted to steal their friend. They continued to consider him suspicious, even though Hyakimaru paid their bill at the restaurant, while Roro, meanwhile, wondered why she fainted and what it meant. Roro thought about it because when she fainted, something definitely seemed important to her at that moment. One of the friends stood up and said that it was time to go, since Roro had already woken up. Roro tried to stop them because she wanted to talk to them. She asked her friends if it was true that they did not recognize her. Her friends looked at her in bewilderment, not knowing what to answer. One of the friends took the phones out of her bag. She then handed one of the phones to Roro. One of her friends said that she doesn't know where Roro gets the courage to call himself Roro, but if she's really confused, then she needs to look into it. The girls showed a photo of the real Roro on their phone and said that this was their friend. Roro realized that she really didn't look like the girl in the photo. Roro couldn't believe it. She didn't understand how it could happen because the photo was supposed to be hers. One of the girls said that they didn't know what was wrong, but she was definitely not who Roro said she was, and Roro began to wonder if there might be something wrong with her body, especially since she fell into fainting earlier. Hyakimaru said that even the slightest shock can distort memories. After that, he snapped his fingers right in front of the girls' faces and asked them to focus on him. The girls seemed hypnotized. They did not move and listened carefully to Hyakimaru. Roro became indignant because these were her friends and she was against their hypnosis. But Hyakimaru explained that if they fell for this trick once, they could get caught again, and then he asked Roro to give him her phone. He added that one of the features of hypnosis is the distortion of memories. After that, he returned the phone to her and asked her to look at the screen. He also said that he installed a program developed by Apostol on his phone, and with its help, they could quickly restore the original appearance of the photo. Their goal is to find out whose memories are true. Roro waited impatiently for the program to finish downloading. There was only 95% left, and she hoped that everything would work out. While she waited, she looked at the phone and was amazed by what she saw. She began to analyze the photo more carefully. Roro's eyes began to fill with tears from what he saw on the phone screen. She was deeply grateful to Hyakimaru for his help. Roro realized that it was indeed her friends in the photo. This confirmed her identity as Roro. Hyakimaru looked at her and said that it was indeed true. He snapped his fingers and the girls, hypnotized, woke up. They were very surprised by what happened and could not understand how they ended up in this situation. Friends asked what happened and how it could have happened.